Welcome to Philosophy with Valheim, where we embark on a journey through the world of Valheim while contemplating what it means to be a good person and other philosophical topics. I'd like to start off this series by talking about what I consider one of the most important virtues: humility. I consider it most important because it's a prerequisite to improve in any given domain. Not because you need to be perfectly humble to make any improvements, but because when you attempt to improve yourself in some way, you need some measure of humility in that domain to do so. Now, humility is a virtue, and like all virtues, which are good traits of character, we can only understand it by contrasting it with vices, which are bad traits of character. The vice that humility is contrasted with is pride. So what is pride? Sometimes the word is used positively, like being proud of your children or being proud of your own legitimate accomplishments. And so it's important to make a distinction. When I say pride, I mean the same thing as the more unambiguous term, hubris. In life, we must judge for the quality or value of what we encounter. This might be things, events, actions, abilities, or, as we are doing right now, character traits and people as a whole. And if we are judging people, that means that we will inevitably judge the person that is ever present in our lives, our own selves. It also means that such a judgment will be incredibly important to us, where we can simply avoid the things, events, and so on that we consider to be bad. We can never escape ourselves. It sounds obvious and needless to say, but it is important to keep in mind when it comes to the workings of pride or hubris. This is because it makes it incredibly likely that we will be desperate to do two things. First and foremost, to avoid seeing ourselves as bad. Secondarily, but still commonly, to actively seek to see ourselves as good. Now, of course, one way of doing this is to, according to our own values, simply not be bad, and simply be what we consider to be good. However, as I'm sure everyone listening will know, this method is followed all too seldom. In our desperation, we simply try the other way, by constructing illusions and delusions about our own value. However, it's also quite rare for us to do so by lying to ourselves. It's very rare for anyone to be able to truly lie to themselves. Some may disagree, but I'll save that for another video. No, instead, what we must rely on for this is our control over our attention. Deep down, we originally may have no false beliefs about our abilities or our value, but we can still construct a kind of illusion by ignoring what suggests negative things about us and paying attention to what suggests positive things about us. We can avoid even engaging with things that we're bad at and stick only to what we're good at, so that we are only ever reminded of our strengths. And we may be inclined to weight certain kinds of evidence more and fill in gaps of uncertainty to lead us to the conclusions that cast a more favourable light on us as individuals. Doing all this, we begin to control the kinds of evidence we can even see about ourselves, and without telling ourselves a single lie, manage to construct false beliefs about our own worth in our heads. Assuming our own worth to be so high, we put ourselves and others at risk, presuming we will do better than we will. We do not even bother to listen to others who may have criticism of our bad behaviours and thus cannot correct them, and ultimately can never improve as people, believing ourselves to be beyond the need to do so. On the basis of this vision of what pride and hubris are, we get the common conception of humility, a mere inversion of it, where the prideful think they can do things the humble think they cannot, where the prideful think they are above others, the humble think they are below others. In other words, we think that to become humble, to cultivate humility, we must replace our pride with shame. But this is terribly, terribly misguided.
You will not be able to master lightning until you have dealt with the turmoil inside you.
What turmoil?
Zuko, you must let go of your feelings of shame if you want your anger to go away.
But I don't feel any shame at all. I'm as proud as ever.
Prince Zuko, pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame.
What Iroh is pointing to here is that you cannot cure shame with pride. But as I have been leading up to, this equally means that you cannot cure pride with shame. Where pride involves hurting yourself and others through an unwillingness to do what's necessary to correct yourself, lest you be reminded of any inadequacy, shame involves hurting yourself and others through the impotence and internal emotional torture that comes from being consumed by self-hatred. Those who are consumed by shame additionally behave much like those consumed by pride, primarily by avoiding situations that might ever remind them of their inadequacies. Where the prideful person sticks to what they're good at and puts a spin on things so they can interpret them as self-aggrandizing strengths, the person filled with shame simply withdraws from even trying at all. They give up quickly and take every criticism and failure as a sign that they are an inherently broken, stupid, or even evil person. All this is to say that pride and shame are inextricably linked. Unlike Iroh, I do not think shame is the source of pride, or even vice versa. Instead, they share a common source that is overcome only with true humility. We cannot think well of ourselves, or we shall be proud. We cannot think badly of ourselves, or we shall be ashamed. Do we aim for some middle ground and always think of ourselves as average? This won't do either, as it still involves some kind of self-deception. So what is true humility? Okay, finally, I'll tell you. It's summed up by this famous quote from C.S. Lewis. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. The thing that both pride and shame have in common is an obsession with one's own self, of thinking of the idea of oneself in one's head and inevitably judging it. Thus the solution to pride and shame, the path to humility, lies in the ability to cease thinking about yourself. Not neglecting your needs, but very, very literally not having any thoughts about yourself. How is this possible? How do you even accomplish this? I imagine many might ask these questions. There is more than one way, the best, in my opinion, being an attainment of insight via Buddhist mindfulness meditation to get a taste of what it's like to experience life without any sense of yourself. But this takes much effort and much time, and so I will offer you a simpler way. To think of yourself less, try approaching self-improvement and problems with a different framing. Instead of talking about yourself, simply talk about what the right thing to do is. Do not talk about how you failed. Simply think about what methods do not work. Do not talk about what's wrong with you. Simply think about what traits are bad and avoid them. There's no need to bring any thought of you or yourself into it. Simply ask yourself what's good and bad, then seek the good stuff and avoid the bad stuff. If you do not think of yourself, you cannot judge it, and thus you can neither become obsessed with being superior, nor torture yourself over being inferior. There is only the striving for goodness. Me and my friends have talked about doing this while playing video games. Take Valheim. Everyone dies in this game at some point. Is there any need to say that you died because you suck at the game, then give up out of shame? Is it remotely helpful for you to grow angry with the game and blame it for being unfair? Of course not. You can practice humility on a video game by refusing to attribute failure and success to yourself. Instead, Simply focus on what will improve your gameplay, and then do it. And on what makes things go wrong, and stop doing it. There need be no more thought than that. This will, of course, take practice to apply in real life, and involves learning many more lessons than I can explain in just one video. If you have any questions, I'll answer them in the comments. Or perhaps tell me which you've struggled with more in your life, pride or shame. And of course, if you appreciated this video, support me by liking and subscribing for more videos like this one, as well as other videos about gaming.